If you write articles or copy, or even work as an editor for a magazine, you're going to want to listen to this advert. Are you looking to save time writing online content? Well, Phosphor AI is an online service that will save you hours of work with your content creation. All you have to do is type in your title, and their AI software will get to work writing a high-quality original article just for you. You'll need to review the article and take 15 to 20 minutes to make necessary edits, but then the piece will be ready for publishing. Just for signing up, you'll get 3 free articles so you can try out Phosphor AI and see what it can do all for yourself. Why waste time writing online content yourself when you can get Phosphor AI to do it for you? Try out their service today and see just how much time you can save. That's Phosphor AI. Go to phosphorai.com. So hello everyone, welcome to another episode of Chatter. Today I'm here with Ralph Schoellhammer, who is a professor of economics and political science at Webster Vienna, journalist and podcaster. Ralph, welcome to the show.
Josh, thank you so much for having me. I'm very excited about this.
No problem. I was just thinking, I was going to tell you you're the first Austrian that I've had on the show, but I can't actually give you that title. It was a friend of mine who is a cook who came on to talk about food and cooking. So unfortunately, you don't have that title. But
so first, how mean to dangle this in front of my face just to take it away.
First Viennese guest I've ever had.
Oh, there we go.
I must visit your city someday. I've heard so much about it. Never made it out that direction. Stayed around Innsbruck mostly. Anyway, so you have been writing a lot about some very controversial things. Clearly a man with no fear.
Now that's an introduction. I should put that on my business card.
Yeah, a man with no fear. I'm sure you'd get, you'd definitely get a couple of calls with that. For what? I'm not sure. But, so... yeah, the first thing I want to talk about is you basically have laid out this idea that Europe has been the cause of their own energy crisis, that they are very much have themselves to blame. So why do you think this is, and why is it not big bad Russia that's made all our problems?
Well, there is a kind of, there is a very famous commentator on all things related to energy and commodities. They run an interesting Substack and also, by the way, a fantastic Twitter account, and they call themselves Doomberg. It's a play on Bloomberg, but they call themselves Doomberg, and they kind of came up deliberately in a joking way with a fake Sun Tzu quote, which goes like this. They say, if you hand all your leverage to the enemy, then don't be surprised if he uses it. And this is a little bit the situation with Russia. So if one says, okay, what happened in 2022? Sure, we could take the position that the energy crisis is primarily caused by Russia's war against Ukraine. But if we look at the run-up to all of this, we gave all that leverage to Russia, particularly in the energy sector. And this is particularly true for Germany. The French are a little bit of a separate topic, but I'm sure we're going to talk about this as well. It is important to mention different European countries have different energy mixes and have different dependencies on Russia and the kind of fossil fuels they use. But there is one overarching theme that has been true for all over Europe, and particularly the Western European states, but the European Union member states, but also Great Britain. And that is this idea that you can have energy but without any downsides, which meant like no drilling, no exploration within European territory. And what you need in the realms of energy, you can get by renewables. And when we say renewables, we primarily, of course, mean wind and solar. I mean, there is in areas where it's possible, there's, of course, also hydropower. But that's limited to, the Swedes are very good at this. Austria is very strong at it. But this depends on the topographic situation. So not everybody can do hydropower. The Dutch cannot do hydropower, even if they would want to, because they simply don't have the geography for it. And it's self-inflicted also. There would be many natural resources in Europe. This is very often underestimated. There is a lot under the ground that could be explored. And by the way, we're not just talking about gas here, which would be a lot in Poland and Germany. There would even be lithium. There's still remaining potential for coal mining. There is a lot still there, but the decision is for primarily environmental reasons, which again, one can discuss that in greater detail. The decision was made not to tap into these. Now, we can absolutely defend those decisions. That's fine by me. But I think you always have to be honest what the consequences are, which is if you do not access your own energy resources and you decide to import them, there are two consequences. One is it's going to be more expensive. And the second one is if the party from which you import, for whatever reason, turns sour on you or you on them, well, then they're probably going to use that leverage. And this is precisely what we have observed since February 2022. So none of this is a great surprise. And if you look at the numbers, I mean, it was clear that if relations with Russia, or now one could also argue if relations with the United States, because now we shifted to an LNG dependency on the United States, or all these new long-term contracts with Qatar and other Gulf states for LNG in the future, if relations turn sour with them, we're going to be in exactly the same situation. So it doesn't strike me as if we have really learned from this situation.
Like one of the things that really confuses me about the entire discussion about energy, about fossil fuels, about renewable sources of energy is that we seem to be trying to make this leap in some senses to like fully renewable sources of energy before we're actually capable of doing that. And it's like we don't even want to accept, like, because I don't know, if we got enough lithium and, you know, dealt with the problems with the grid and, you know, managed to deal with like storing all the energy so that, you know, renewables were the viable source for most of our fuel. It's like we still need some other fuel in the interim till we get to that period, right? Why? Because it seems to, it's like, because it's not just like, so Europe have kind of, as you've laid out, caused some of their own problems. Like, I mean, Germany turned off or decommissioned all of their nuclear plants. America has been shutting down some of the new oil pipelines coming down from Canada. And it seems like we're trying to pretend like we're there and like totally ready for 100% renewables, like technologically and like in terms of infrastructure. And we're taking away these old sources of energy with no like plan to replace them. And it just seems like energy suicide. Like, what on earth is going on?
Well, I think there's kind of three answers, I believe, to this question. One is, I think we often have forgotten how much modern life depends on energy. I think this is something that simply eludes us. And I'm not just talking about electricity kind of as the most prominent form of energy in our daily lives, right? We're just used to the fact, you know, we plug in our computer, we plug in our cell phone. Who knows, very soon, all of us have to plug in their electric vehicles. We're just used then to the idea that electricity is going to come out of it. But we underestimate there's a lot more going on. Just to give an example, the modern city, if you want, right, is built on steel, it's built on concrete, right? And all of this needs vast amounts of energy to be produced. Like the process to turn lime into cement, into concrete, right? It's a very energy intensive process. The same, of course, is true with steel, right? And other materials and other metals, that you cannot process them with low-level heat. You need massive amounts of industrial heat, and all of this can, at the moment, only be or most effectively be provided by fossil fuels. Yes, there are ideas that we can use hydrogen, and there are potential alternatives, but that's all still in the development phase. And there are already people who say that maybe, again, I'm not saying I'm one of them, I'm just laying out what the argument is, that hydrogen is not going to be as easy as many think. It's less energy dense than natural gas. It needs to be kept at much colder temperatures, which could potentially lead to more erosion in pipelines, because currently the plan is we just use the natural gas pipelines then for hydrogen. So there is a lot now that even the alternatives that we're thinking about potentially are not going to be the right ones or as feasible as you might think. And the reason why I'm saying is because there's this idea, you know what, you take a couple of fewer hot showers, and let's say you only charge your phone at night, and then we kind of, like with a snap of our fingers, can move everything to wind, move everything to solar or to burning biomass or anything. But it's not going to work like this, because the major processes necessary to sustain civilization need energy. I mean, and we haven't even talked about another field that I would like to mention, which is plastics. Right? You need both for the chemical processes to create it, and also for the compounds that make it. You need fossil fuels to create plastic, and right. You probably see it in the background. I'm a very nostalgic person. So, but we don't just use plastic for Masters of the Universe action figures. Right? Go to a modern hospital. Everything there is for good reason is made of plastic, because it's a very convenient form to to store blood, for injections and all these kind of things. It's all these it's bendable, right? So you can create the artificial breathing machinery and all of this. So lots of things that make civilized life possible depends on energy. And I think we have forgotten this. We tell the story. I know, I'm sorry, I'll probably apologize. It's going to be a little bit of a longer answer.
That's right.
But I think we tell the story about energy wrong. We tell it as if it's just one part of modern life, right? It's one topic. Kind of we compartmentalize it, but in fact, it's the one thing that underlies everything else. It's, as somebody once remarked, it's kind of the only true universal currency is energy. If you have more of it, you're gonna get richer. If you have less or too little of it, you're gonna get poorer. Take one quick example. A country like Qatar, and I think they have shown this during the football World Cup, right, is pushing significantly above its weight. Why can they do this? Because they are a net primary energy exporter. So, right, the Germans can all huff and puff about, oh, you will not silence us, and our footballers, they will wear an armband with the rainbow flag and all of this. And Qatar pretty much said, listen, you come to us asking us for LNG contracts, and then you think you can, try to humiliate us on the global stage. It's not going to happen. It's not going to work. And this is pretty much exactly what happened, because you cannot run a modern economy without access to energy. And we tend to forget this. And it's particularly ironic. I was thinking about this, just as a quick add-on. I don't know where you live, but as you said, right, I live in Vienna. Especially urbanites like ourselves. I assume you're also in an urban setting at the moment.
Yeah, I'm in London.
Like we are in the person. So we talk here between Vienna and London. If energy becomes scarce, including electricity, we are the ones who are going to be screwed, right? We are the ones who live in the surrounded by steel and concrete with not any kind of pasture around us. The people in the countryside are probably going to be just fine, right? They have much closer access to alternative forms of energy, whether it be wood and whether it be when you can plant at least something in your garden. So for them, I think the survival with, let's say, less energy is more likely or more manageable than for us in the cities. Imagine, you live in an apartment on the 25th floor, and they say, it's too bad, elevators are only going to work 2 days a week. That's like, this is a huge inconvenience. Or who of us, maybe you do it. I'm planning on starting to do it. I don't do it yet. How much food do you have in your refrigerator? Like, if there would be a blackout right now, how long for how long would you have food available?
Maybe a week.
Oh, then you beat me, right? I have a few kinds of tuna. Like, I could make it a couple of days, but I'm not. Anyway, I'm just used to the fact. Like, I plan after this conversation to go to the store and buy something to make for dinner. Now, imagine a situation again where supermarkets are closed for 2 days, 3 days because there is no electricity.
No food.
I think we completely underestimate the potential repercussions. And this brings me to my other point that especially the proponents, I think, of renewables, either by accident or deliberately obfuscate or are not willing to accept. We had in Great Britain and Germany, if you look at the numbers over the last couple of days, we had periods where renewables contributed about 3%, 4% to overall electricity needs. Now, one can say, well, what's the big deal, right? It happens once or twice a year, so why should we care? Because electricity, especially, is something you need 24/7. It's not a commodity, it's a service, right? It's like your doctor telling you, saying, listen, Josh, you're very healthy, but there might be one day a year where you can't breathe, but you're going to be fine for the rest of the year. So 364 days, your heart, your lungs are going to be fine, but there's one day where both of them are not going to work. Well, you'll be dead, right? So it might be an outlier. You could say on average, it's fine, but in fact, it's a lethal thing. And I believe this is how we also have to look at energy. This is not something where I say we had a lot of electricity in August, so it's okay if we don't have it in December. This is not like none of this works like this. I mean, can you imagine how much food we would have to throw away if refrigeration chains at food distributors are broken for a couple of hours? I mean, just again from an environmental and moral perspective, how much we would have to just throw away because it would go bad. And I think this is where we are not honest in the debate about energy. And the last point on this, which I think is also very important, I'm not opposed to nuclear, I'm not opposed to wind, but I think we have to face them for what they are, which is they have the so-called capacity factors are very low. By capacity factor, we mean you can build, 35 gigawatts of solar capacity. And what this means is that on a perfect day, under perfect conditions, it could produce that vast amount of energy, of electricity in this case. But those conditions are barely ever existent. So on average, the capacity for solar in Great Britain is a little higher, right? I think it's about 15%. In the US, it's around 25% because they have California, Arizona, New Mexico. In Germany, it's 11%.
Whoa. So why is it so low in Germany? Do you just have you have more cloud cover?
Because let's put it this way: Munich and Berlin, for example, have fewer sunny days than Seattle. Germany is, and don't get me wrong, I like the Germans, but I mean, when you think about when you think about sun and blue skies, is your first thought Germany?
No, it's not.
It's not, right? You think about the coast areas. It's like in Sicily, it would make a lot of sense, right? If you say you build solar farms in Sicily, in North Africa, absolutely. But to do it in Bavaria or in the Alps it makes no sense. Of course you can do it, and of course people are saying, well, but look how much we built. Of course it's going to produce some electricity, but is it the best possible way to do it? It's like saying if you have to commute 100 kilometers every day. You could do it hypothetically by bike, but is it the most efficient way to do it? So I think this is, again, we should not just be looking for what is possible. We should look at, is the possible way the best possible way? And this brings me to what you said, and this is what irks me so much. If we look at the numbers, I mean, we do have a revolutionary source for energy with a capacity factor of 90%, meaning it actually provides the energy that it can on its best days. It really does do it for most of the time. And that is nuclear. As I said, people say, oh, you're a proponent of nuclear. Well, I'm not a proponent of nuclear. I'm just saying of all the available possibilities, with the exception of hydropower, but that, as we discussed early on, right, simply depends so much on geography. It is a very, very good option because it does not just produce electricity, it produces heat. So there's a lot you can do with it. I do admit, and full disclosure here, the more I have engaged with the matter of nuclear energy, I admit that the more of a fan I become, because there is still so much potential. But we don't see it because there is this almost, and I don't begrudge anybody who holds that view, but I think we have to call it what it is. There is such a strong ideological component that has become connected to the matter of renewables. Right? It's not no longer that we say, okay, this seemed like a good idea. We tried it. It's not perfect, right? Some things you just find out when you try it. So maybe we should make adjustments. It's more like we have to double down on this, and the less it works, the more we have to double down on it. It's a form of I described it recently. It's a form of cognitive dissonance, right? You throw virgins into volcanoes because you hope you're gonna get a great harvest, and the harvest just doesn't come. So you don't say, should we try something else? You say, no, we have to throw twice as many virgins in the volcano. Then it's gonna work. And this is a little bit as it seems at the moment, because fact is, if there is no sun, if there is no wind blowing, it does not matter how many wind turbines or solar panels you put up. They're not going to produce any energy, any electricity. I mean, I had conversations where I'm not joking here, right? Where I was basically treated like a conspiracy nut for pointing out for pointing out that the sun doesn't shine at night. So this is now controversial, right? So we are in a societal stage, right? Like so I thought that the whole debate whether what a woman is and whether there is biological sex, I thought that that's going to be the high point of contentious debate. So no, we have now reached a stage where pointing out there is no sun at night, that they say, well, that's just a right-wing talking point, and it's very hard to I mean, what do you say then? Well, I heard somebody else said, yeah, nuclear sounds interesting. But you do know that the nuclear that's what is it? That's the energy of choice for the right wingers. So I mean, what are you going to say? I mean, well, apparently the right wingers then are smarter when it comes to energy than the left wingers. I don't know, but it shows you the ideological content, and I think there is as if you allow me this one more point. Mm-hmm. There is a cultural factor underlying this that I understand it in the Austrian and German case, not so much, I have to admit, in other countries. But I think there is this idea, particularly in Germany, that a country that for various reasons, has unfortunately in the last 100 years, more often than not, stood on the wrong side of history, to put it this way. That for them, this is seen as a chance to redeem themselves. Right? So 2 world wars that didn't work out as expected. But now this is the chance, after twice being not unjustifiably accused of causing a firestorm that wrecked large parts of the world. Now we found the key to redeem the world. And you see it in the language, right? It kind of the way also politicians speak about this. I think there's a lot to this, and we should not forget this. So that gives I think a very important dimension to this, because if again, for me, it's about I want cheap energy because I think it's good for prosperity. It makes things cheaper. It helps out the lower classes. It helps out people in economic distress. And if this energy comes from hydro, if it comes from wind, if it comes from nuclear, I don't care as long as it's there. But once you tie your soul to specific energy forms, right? Once your identity is almost determined by your allegiance to wind, to solar, and a few others, to hydrogen, then it's more difficult, because then it's no longer a means to an end. They become an end in themselves. And this is, I think, in men, not everyone, not everywhere, but I think this is a kind of a ideological phenomenon that has captured many in the media, many in politics, and many in the realm of culture. So it's no longer about because that's all my questions when I talk with him. So, okay, what is the goal? Right? And they say sustainability. Okay, sustainability of what? They say, well, of the planet. Okay, so is the planet really going to die? I mean, if you look at the history of the Earth, I mean, it has been through a lot, right? I mean, from volcanoes, asteroids. So and to be honest, I love nature, but I don't think that Earth has a consciousness in a way that they present it, which again shows me that it is a religious ideological component. Right? You hear it when they say, well, with global warming and supposedly in many ways, I have to admit the data is more ambiguous there than many would like admit. Right? There's more flooding and more storms and everything, and this is kind of nature showing us it's upset or something. Is it? Is it? Again, this sounds to me this is almost that's a hard word. You cannot distinguish it from some 16th century cleric saying the plague is God's answer for your sinful behavior. I see many parallels there, and that's what I'm worried about. And you see it also with beating a dead horse, but I am worried when I hear that people like Greta Thunberg all of a sudden say, well, climate was just the beginning. And these are her words, not mine. Environment and climate was just the beginning. Now it's about ending the Western capitalist system. Because that tells me what the motivation is, which is exactly this idea that the world suffers because of Western capitalism. And now climate change policies will be a way to atone for the horrors that the West has brought upon the world. And that may not or may not be true, but that's a different kind of motivation, right? As I said before, I want energy because I think energy is important. These other people want kind of to revolutionize energy production because they see it as a way to atone for their historical sins. And I think we have to name those motivations, because I think they explain a lot of the mistaken directions we go into. And the third part, and that's really the last one, of course, and then you have politicians who are opportunists. I mean, if you take the German situation, I mean, spending 500 billion euros for an energy transition that the only thing they really transitioned to was to Russian gas. And to give all these Sunday speeches, how great we are in wind, how great we are in solar, how great we are in renewables. But in fact, if you look at the numbers, all you see is that every year they imported more and more and more and more gas from Russia. I mean, but that's politics, right? They try to have their cake and eat it too, because they know if you triple energy bills, people will revolt. But they also like to hear about how fantastic they are doing in the energy transition. So why not give them both? Right. So with one hand, you say everything is great, and the other hand is, pushing the money to the Russians and getting their gas. I think that's the cynical but sad reality.
Yeah, unfortunately. So why is the conversation never about efficiency of our products and our like, electronics? Because like it seems to me like, say we made everything 50% more efficient, then we would drop our carbon footprint by 50%, right? That's how it would work. But the conversation is very rarely about that. It seems to be almost exclusively about, okay, so we need to stop using fossil fuels immediately because they're the worst thing in the world. Like, why do you think that is like, what if we just used the energy better? Why is that never like a talking point, do you think?
No, I think you could not be more on the money. I think you're right, but I would only add, but that this is happening. If you look, for example, in European nations and the United States, in Great Britain, in Australia, if you look at the development of GDP and fossil fuel use, right, and CO2 emissions, they have been decoupled. So the economy is growing at a higher rate than CO2 emissions and the use of fossil fuels. So we are moving in the right direction. That's kind of the thing that always drives me crazy. We are moving in the right direction. It's just, as you just correctly pointed out, it's just that it has to happen tomorrow. It has to happen today. Okay, that's not going to work. But that we are on a good path. And I think it's so mind-boggling that nobody is willing to say this is going to be a gradual process. And we'll get better step by step. And we're going to end up, I'm sure, in 20, 30, 40, 50 years, again, with much more efficient, less energy abusing economies than we are today. But we're not going to end up at fossil-free economies, right? This is this extreme black and white. It's all or nothing. It's going to be gradual, right? You move from coal to gas, and then you move from gas. Where can you replace it with nuclear? Where does it make sense to replace it with hydrogen? Where, of course, absolutely. If you have regular and reliable wind that you can add to the baseload, of course there is a room for wind turbines. Of course, we're also going to use solar panels. So I think this is all possible, but this is not how the debate is conducted. It's all about, if it's not going to happen tomorrow, we are out of time. No, right? I think so. We are not out of time. The world is not going to end in 5 years, right? This is, if we don't do it now, then we're going to reach this inflection points, and then there is no way. To be quite honest, if that's the case, then we're screwed anyways.
Yeah, because they've already said that 1.5 degrees is set in by the end of the century. Like they've said that's happening. Right.
Correct. I mean, we saw it. I mean, we ran this almost, quote unquote, perfect experiment. We shut down the global economy to different degrees at different parts of the world, but we pretty much shut down the global economy for a significant amount of time during COVID. And it was barely a dent in fossil fuel use. So you would have to go, COVID lockdown measurements on steroids to really reach the kind of decline in fossil fuel use that the most extreme movements want. And
let's not give them any ideas, man.
But the thing that the people say, well, I mean, so why would that be so bad? Well, because modern life would cease to exist. it would simply cease to exist. And that's, I think, the truly astounding thing in these debates. And they also, in many ways, of course, make things worse. I'm not convinced that over their entire lifetime, from production to decommission, electric cars as they are currently at the current state of the art, if they truly are less of a burden for the climate, for the environment, than, let's say, the regular efficient car or a well-built hybrid car. I'm not convinced. Everybody knows, who's honest about this, that the electric grids in Europe, in the United States, in Australia, in all other parts of the world who want to switch to electric cars by the end of 2030 are not prepared for this. Right? They are not, the grids are not going to survive such a switch. So then the question is, so what's the idea? And they're the ideas. And this, I think, also important. It is, well, not everybody needs a car. And the problem, and I, to be full disclosure, I don't own a car. So it's possible. Yeah, so it's possible. But the thing is, most people think, Jim is not going to have a car. I'm still going to have mine. But then it will turn out, nope, Jim is not going to have his, and you won't either. And I think people are not going to get along with it. And this is, again, as much as I'm happy to share the overall goals of, more, as you mentioned, more efficiency, less fossil fuel use. If the means that are suggested to reach that goal come at such distortions in distribution of wealth, in distribution of access to the comforts we could use in our daily lives, you simply are going to lose public support for this. Because that was the story, at least in the past. The story was, we can make this transition, and maybe your electricity bill is going to be slightly more expensive, but it's all going to be, within the realm of that's tolerable. And now more and more with it's kind of moving gradually outside of the realm of the tolerable. And we already have these debates. You hear this, in the New York Times, in other outlets, and say, well, maybe democracy is not the right system in such a crisis. So maybe people are just not smart enough. And these are very worrisome trends. There is kind of under the guise, and I do not deny that the pure intentions of those behind it, but there is an authoritarian, totalitarian political program underpinning the rapid push to renewables that I think will not stop at the realm of energy. Because then they're going to look at, okay, if we cannot make the necessary energy, we have to reduce uses, right? And then you end up at first it might be only, run the washer and dryer at night. And then it's, we should eat less meat, and we should eat less in general. And then all these comforts of daily life, of regular life, will disappear. And as always, someone could say, well, we are an oversaturated, over-consuming society anyways. Maybe, but I'll be honest, I like it that way. I think one of the greatest things is the consumer society. I want to go into the store and in December and buy bananas and buy strawberries in March and get a pineapple for €2.10. I think these are great things. And why are they great? They're great because even members of lower classes, of working classes, right, of less economic power, have access to things that have been luxury goods 100 years ago. And I want to keep that. I want people to still be able to have these few joys in life, and not make it as it was 200 years ago, that the super rich will always have their bananas and their pineapples. And that's so there's always also a kind of class warfare element in the energy transition debate. And I think we have to point this out again, not because one is against the transition, but saying we need to think through what the consequences of, as you correctly mentioned it, what the consequences of an ideologically and not scientifically driven approach to this is. And I think we are very delusional about thinking what's going to come. I mean, 2023 is going to be a test because most people will only feel the energy crunch and see it in their bills next year. And we'll see how they're going to react. And I don't think it's going to be pretty.
Yeah, we'll get on to how I think people are going to react in a minute, actually. But And I definitely think the point you made about why some in like anti fossil fuel activists are not willing to consider nuclear because of ideological purity. And I think that speaks to a lot to what is the most important thing for the people is like, okay, so is our CO2 and greenhouse gas like emissions, is that really the top of the priority? Because if so, and this, but then that's the other problem with like calling it a crisis and stating that it's something that has to be dealt with. Because when something is a crisis that's going to destroy the world, then any actions in order to alleviate it are justified.
No, that's true. That's
But
true.
I
But
wanted, sorry, I just
no, just
go ahead.
one quick one, because you made such a perfect point. Just one quick sentence. I mean, imagine you are someone who dedicated his entire life fighting a problem, and they said, this is the most urgent problem, the most thing. And then your neighbor comes along and says, oh, we have a solution for that problem. And that has been around since the 50s. I mean, are you going to be like, oh, well, then I guess my life's work was for nothing? Or are you try to find ways why that solution is actually not the solution? And I think this is a little bit the extinction rebellion, last generation issue with nuclear, because they are like these young energetic people who kind of know they are the only ones who see the problem and they figured out what to do. And then some old kooks come along and say, we had this thing that we started in the 1960s called nuclear power plants, and they could be pretty much a solution to all the problems that you're pointing out. Like, I guess I wouldn't accept it either.
So the question I wanted to ask you was like, so that I think you're right about this sort of anti-capitalist authoritarianism that sort of underlines at least some of the environmental movement, at least the ones calling for the most extreme actions. But do you know what a steelman argument is?
I know what a strawman argument
Okay,
is. What
so
is a steelman
a
argument?
steelman is essentially the opposite, right? So, like, if I was wondering if you could make the best possible case for abandoning democracy in order to save the planet from the scourge of the fossil fuel industry. Like, do you see, like, what's the strongest argument that you personally could make for that?
So you want me to make a case for the abandonment of democracy?
Yes. Just like it's like for me it's I've been listening to a lot of Lex Friedman, and he does this great thing where he asks people to like come up with the strongest argument for their opponents.
I mean, you could no, it's a good question. Well, let me give you two examples. I think you could do it if you actually. This is a fantastic question. I would even be willing to consider it if there is a plan that says, okay, here are the goals that we set, and once these go, whatever those goals are, and they must be feasible goals, right? So they must be non-ambitious. And once these goals are accomplished, kind of democracy is immediately reinstated. The best historical example I can think of is Abraham Lincoln during the Civil War in the United States, right? Like, he had extraordinary powers. Many at the time, important civil rights were suspended, from free speech to habeas corpus, but it was pretty clear that this is going to end once the war is over. So if the argument would be, so here is our, let's say, 5-point plan. This 5-point plan can be executed in 4 to 6 years. And once this is done, we revert back to democracy. I think then I could live with it. But that's so if that would be the plan. But then, right, it would really have to be a plan designed to solve the problem at hand. It cannot then become a longer ideological crusade, right? So if the plan is, we want dictatorial powers until we have overcome capitalism, that's not going to work. If they say we want dictatorial powers until we have built, let's say, 100 gigawatt of solar capacity. Okay, I mean, then that's a plan, right? Then this is something you can measure. You can have institutions in place that monitor it. So I think that there is room, and there's always been, for temporal suspension, martial law, times of extraordinary distress. So I think there could be an argument made for that. But I would like to see the argument first.
Well, no, I mean that makes sense. You want to see the plan. Like
Yeah,
I
exactly.
also want to see the plan.
Yeah.
And sort of wrapped up in this discussion that a lot of people are having about energy consumption is farming. Like it's very much at the center of it, just because of how energy intensive the food production process is. Like, I mean, it's literally the fuel of life. It doesn't shock me that it's very energy intensive. But and Holland, I believe, is one of the like most efficient places in the world at farming. And
Yes.
so basically, like, I don't understand what's happened here, right? In order to save the planet, the place that has cracked the most efficient form of food production is going to stop producing that much food so that they damage the environment less. But I don't understand this case at all. I do not understand what the fuck is going on with these farmers. So could you please shed some light on this for me?
Yeah, I mean, this is one of the most interesting cases because it's also spilling over into other European nations. The Dutch have their own mini. I mean, this was kind of my segue into the entire energy question, everything kind of with the Dutch farmers. And I wrote a couple of months ago an article about it for Newsweek, where I made the argument that this is part of kind of the broader green agenda, the broader climate agenda. And I was kind of heavily criticized for, no, this is about nitrogen, right? This is about CO2. This has nothing to do with the climate. It's completely different. So 3 days ago, the Dutch Minister of Nitrogen, they literally have a minister that's called the Minister of Nitrogen, went into public and said, no, this is part of our climate agenda. I mean, I was very happy because I felt vindicated, right, by the person behind all of it. But it's again something we have to see in this kind of broader ideological context, and this broader ideological context, which is that there is, and another thing she said was that for the Dutch, in her interpretation, it is more important to rejuvenate and kind of and reestablish the pristine state of nature than being one of the world's largest agricultural exporters. I mean, first of all, I think honesty is great. So she said pretty much what she was thinking. All right, that this is part of the plan. That this is the intention behind it. But we always have to ask, why is that the case, right? Where does this obsession come from with that nature untouched by human activity is the preferred state? And I think, again, it falls into this larger anti-humanistic, if you want, kind of ideology, right? Where the best place in the world is the place where humanity hasn't left any traces. By the way, very, very different from how the Dutch viewed all of this in the 19th century. But there is, again, there is no imminent ecological collapse in the Netherlands. I mean, this is one thing, it's everything nowadays in the debate about from climate to agriculture is that everything is immediate collapse. There is no immediate collapse. The Dutch farmers, once again, just as with CO2 emissions, have been reducing their nitrogen emissions constantly over the last years, but the government was making ever more excessive demands that they have to do it faster, and they say we can't. So another government steps in, well, then we have to reduce the farms, right? Then we kind of have to buy out the farms. And as they said, they made this one offer, whether they will buy them for a significant amount over market value, but a better offer is not going to come. And if they don't take it, right, the government will consider other steps as well. Now, again, go on.
I just wanted to clarify something here, but just like, because I genuinely don't know what the effect of nitrogen is in the atmosphere, or like what would be the reason? Is it like too much nitrogen in the soil, or like what is the reason for the desire to reduce nitrogen? Because I understand like when people come and say, right, okay, we want to reduce CO2 emissions, they say, okay, it's because there's a greenhouse gas, it traps heat in the atmosphere, and then with methane, the argument's basically the same, except that it's worse. So what's the argument about nitrogen, and why are they so determined to reduce their nitrogen emissions?
Well, some arguments are that kind of nitrogen, as it accumulates in the groundwater, as it accumulates in the soil, it has a deteriorative effect on certain insect groups. It has a negative effect on biodiversity. I mean, it's a little bit contested. So I have also seen studies that say that the way these studies have been conducted, it's not at all clear that nitrogen is the main culprit. But there is another problem that we have to discuss in line of this, which is that nitrogen is the most important, or among the most important, three ingredients for synthetic fertilizer. And there the numbers are absolutely clear. We cannot feed 4 billion people in the world without synthetic fertilizers. We could feed 4 billion. So if we would stop the entire use of synthetic fertilizers, which would rapidly decrease nitrogen, then 4 billion people would most likely starve. I mean, the irony here is again, and again, we can have debates about alternatives and all these kind of things, but the irony is that it was the ability to synthetically create nitrogen that saved the world at the turn from the 19th to the 20th century from mass starvation, because populations were growing so fast that food production couldn't keep up, and they could not just expand farmland. So they had to actually expand the crop yields, per square mile of farm. And the only way to do this was via such a hard word for a German speaker, synthetic fertilizers. And you cannot, and this is where we again have this misinformation, you cannot replace it with manure or these kind of things, because the nitrogen content is too little. It's too small. So we need these modern tools of modern agriculture. Otherwise, the world is going to starve. Now, if they close down, currently it's about 3,000 farms. If they close down 6,000 farms in the Netherlands, the world is not going to starve. Europe is not going to starve, and the Dutch are not going to starve. But, and I think this is once again one of these unintended consequences that tend to be overlooked. Not only are the Dutch great innovators in the realm of agriculture, but you also discourage an entire sector in your economy. I mean, if you're a Dutch farmer, and very often these farms, I mean, to be clear, the Dutch farmers are very wealthy. So these are not poor people, but they are industrious people. They're innovative people. So you can be a productive member of society and be rich. I don't think that there's necessarily a contradiction, or be wealthy, let's put it this way. And why would you invest, right? I think we repeat the same mistake we did with oil and gas. We start to do the same in the agricultural sector. If you discourage investment in these areas, you're not going to have, whatever it is they provide in the years to come. I mean, we know, right? The numbers are clear. Nobody denies them. We have significantly underinvested, for example, in oil and gas infrastructure, in refinery capacity, in everything needed to keep kind of the fossil fuel industry going. Because the idea was in 10 years, we no longer need it. Now these 10 years have passed, we still need it, but we don't have the infrastructure. And I think agriculture will be a similar thing. Now we go to war with modern agriculture, and then in 10 years, we're going to find out that, wait a moment, the replacement is not really there. I give you one quick example on this. Germany wants to go 30% organic in its agriculture over the next 10 to 20 years. Mm-hmm. This would turn Germany from a net exporter of agricultural products into a net importer of agricultural products. I mean, first of all, after they had such great success with outsourcing their energy to Russia, now outsourcing your food production is going to be just as amazing, I'm sure. But imagine everybody follows that model. So from where are you going to import the food? And when we have a perfect example, what happens, really a perfect one, and that was Sri Lanka. Right? Sri Lanka was praised in every news media by every NGO. They did it. They got no more synthetic fertilizers, all organic, and they show the world you can do it. The only thing that happened is they turned from an exporter of rice to an importer of rice, and the population starved because they imported rice and tea as well, which was one of their main export staples to make money. All of a sudden, they had to pay for things where in the past they did get paid for. And now everybody, and how quickly it also, this disappeared from the media, right? So we heard, they stormed the palace, so they had to report about this. But barely anybody was willing to drill down why this happened. They were egged on. They were encouraged to put policies into place that ultimately put them on a path to economic disaster. And not in all ways, But in many ways, we seem to want to replicate on a different level these same policies, and it's hard to understand. Which is why I always come back to the thing that I can be wrong, of course, as always, but I can only explain it as part of an ideological campaign. And to give you one example of this, the German Minister of Agriculture was posting a selfie recently where he said he just met with NGOs and academics to discuss the future of German farming, of German agriculture. And a member of the German Association of Farmers wrote under the picture, he said, so he knows all the people on the picture, and he's a little surprised that the Minister of Agriculture has not invited a single representative of the German farming community to discuss the future of agriculture. So Greenpeace was there, right? And all the NGOs was there. But the only people not at the table were those who actually make the food. And this is for me, right? And I talked to another friend of mine who works for an energy company in Switzerland. And the Swiss tend to be very, very effective in everything. And he said that the same thing. There was a meeting about creating the Swiss plan for the energy transition. And he says, there was not a single technician in there, right? There was not a single member of those companies that make high voltage lines, right? So all the companies, the individuals that have to put the bits and pieces into place to make it possible, they were not invited. There were philosophers were there, human rights activists were there, right? Green NGOs were there, but nobody who actually works in the energy business was there. And this is to be very clear, right? Very often I get the question, say, well, so is this a kind of a broader plan by the WF, or is it Klaus Schwab? Or thing? I don't think it is. I really don't think it is. I think it's particularly those who have grown up in urban settings, have been marinated in the modern educational system, the modern university system. They honestly believe this. So I don't think there is a. I mean, there are interest groups and everything, but I don't think it's like that there is a cabal of people that know what they're doing is problematic, but they do it anyways. I think it's people that honestly believe in what they're doing. And that makes them, in my opinion, that makes them so dangerous. If it would only be something that's calculated, you could change course. But if it's almost a religious kind of fervor that drives your actions, I think it's much, much harder to get to change your position.
Yeah, I think it's probably both, but it varies. That like it depends what day it is. Depends on which one I think is the stronger force.
Yes.
It's probably both human stupidity combined with some powerful people trying to take advantage of it, and that could probably describe most of the history of humanity. So
yeah, no, that's true. Yeah, no, you're right. But I mean, think about it. When I think when Netflix is, I haven't seen the movie, so when Netflix kind of produces, I think it was Don't Look Up. So this movie with I think Leonardo DiCaprio and I forgot the girl from the Hunger Games, Jennifer Lawrence. Yeah, right. So all kind of, and I don't think that Klaus Schwab has to call Netflix and say, "Hey guys, it would be great if you would make a movie that." He doesn't have to, because they're gonna make it anyway. But that kind of information is kind of it's trickled into the entire cultural, political atmosphere, and that you don't need it. It works on its own. You really don't need necessarily somebody to do it.
So I must have been at the start of this year, or maybe even last year. I'll need to look this up. Anyway, I had this guy on the show called Dr. Randy Thornhill, and he proposed this theory about, well, I mean, he's got a lot of evidence to back it up, and it's essentially that the more infectious diseases exist in a country, the further to the right and more authoritarian their political system tends to be, or that their general sort of average political thought tends to be. I'm gonna need to look up the name of the theory because right now it's really, really escaping my mind. 1 second. Randy Thornhill is the guy. Parasite stress. That's it. Parasite stress.
Okay, very interesting.
So it's fascinating, man. Like, people can listen to either my episode with him, or they can go and listen to the one he did with Dr. Jordan Peterson on his podcast, which probably goes into it better than I was capable of getting him to explain. But yeah, basically he thinks that as the prevalence of infectious disease increases in a country, you get the country is on average further to the right and more authoritarian. And I had a conversation with him about whether he thought that COVID was going to do this to the world, whether he thought that it was a possibility that in response to this pandemic, that the world, the average political sort of leaning of people would go further to the right and more authoritarian. And I kind of think he might be right, because I think that's what we're seeing, right? And I just I wanted to get your take on how the world is reacting, and sort of what has changed with coming out of the pandemic, and all of the climate discussions that are happening right now, and it feels like we're in a very volatile period of human history. And I was sort of wondering where you think we have been redirected as a result of the past couple of years.
Yeah, I mean, this is a great topic. I would agree. I mean, I'm not yet familiar, but I definitely will listen to a podcast and familiarize myself with it, with Dr. Thornhill's work. I would argue that it's half right in the sense of I would fully agree with the authoritarian part. I would only disagree. I don't think that authoritarianism is necessarily limited to the right wing.
No, I don't mean that at all. I mean that, like, on the compass, like the thing people are going, on the 4-point compass, the authoritarian, libertarian, left, right. I think it's shifting people to the right and further up on that compass.
I think the up, I agree, right? With the no, I think there is something to it, but it's odd. I mean, if you look at Germany voted. It's a left-wing coalition into government. If current polls could be believed, I mean, it looks like if Great Britain would, go to the polls tomorrow, that Labour would, the Conservatives would be a shadow of themselves. Whatever's going to be left at them. The US.
I wouldn't consider that party to be either left or libertarian. I would say that
I do agree. Yes, no, I do agree. I do agree. I was hoping you wouldn't trip me up on that, but you're absolutely right. But we also, right, we had the midterms in the United States, and I mean, they didn't really represent a shift to the right, or necessarily to the more authoritarian. I think it's hard to. I think it's somewhat nation specific. And the reason why I'm saying this, I know that this seems like I'm dodging the bullet, but let me add on very quickly what I mean by this. I'm sometimes reminded on the global financial crisis in 2008, right, as it broke out, and I found it quite intriguing because you saw the European reaction, or the movements that popped up most forcefully in Europe were kind of, the state needs to do more. Okay, we need more government intervention. We need more government control and interference. But the movement that popped up in the United States was, again, for better or worse, but we can have this discussion as well, of course. But there was the Tea Party movement, which was more or less a movement that said, get the government out of my business, right? We want less government. So I think it's a tricky. It's very hard to say that the reaction is going to be the same in every country. I mean, and you saw this also during COVID, right? I mean, you have states with like very strong governments like Sweden or generally the Scandinavians, but they are not authoritarian. And I think then you have, I would argue, countries like, I mean, they're also, but compared to the Swedes, but Germany is in many ways, it's a kind of soft authoritarianism, but in many ways it's more authoritarianism, even though they're kind of the taxes are slightly lower. Let's put it this way. So this is a tricky thing, but I have to admit, and this is something this is why I think this is such a great topic and such a great question. I mean, I was surprised by the degree to which populations accepted a very strong form of authoritarianism by their governments. And I think that's what the theory seems to be right. So if the reason is a virus, right, if the reason is a health issue, people are willing to put up with a lot. And it was not so bad, I guess, in Austria, but I mean, maybe a little bit of it was exaggerated.
I was there for the second
no, you're right.
winter,
You know
man.
what? Yeah, you're right. Actually, yeah, you're right. I see, I do the same thing. So it's like we don't say, oh, it wasn't that bad. But in but also in Australia, I think that.
It didn't get quite that bad. Yeah.
Yeah, or in France, when you couldn't walk around. I mean, these things were massive infringements on
even curfews
on
in peacetime. You know, like in peacetime.
I think
seems insane.
The Canadian commentator, who he's now, I was always a huge fan of him. He's my great idol when it comes to writing. I always wish that I could write like him, but I'm far from being capable of anything like that. Who's a lot on GB News these days is Mark Stein, and he had this line during the pandemic. He said, that in France, even under 4 years of German occupation, the pubs and bistros had open until midnight, and in Britain the pubs had open, during the Blitz, during the worst times of World War II, and not even that was possible during COVID. However, I think it dovetails nicely with the question you had before, right? The Steelman argument. As long as people had the expectation that this is going to be, it was longer than expected, but as long as they still had the idea that this is probably only temporarily, I think that they were willing to put up with it. And what I find, I can only speak about Austria, I don't know how it's in Britain. What I find encouraging is, I mean, we still have the mayor of Vienna going out there and saying the pandemic is not over. And I think Anthony Fauci recently said, we're still in the middle of the pandemic, right? But you see, people just basically say, I'm not going to do it on camera, but they pretty much flick them off and, go buckle yourself. Nobody cares anymore about this. And so that gives me some sense that, I mean, what worries me, just if I'm in this one sentence, what does worry me is if a worse pandemic should break out, right, with a virus that is and again, every person who lost their life due to this virus is tragic, so I don't belittle this, but that is as, let's say, as severe as we feared that COVID would be. That there's people kind of been there, done that. So could you do the same measures with the same level of compliance, whether it was high or low separation? I think people would not go along with it. So governments have squandered in recent years on multiple issues, not just COVID. I think they have squandered a lot of social capital and public trust. And what's maddening about this is, and what apparently politicians do not understand, you cannot compartmentalize. In the sense, you cannot tell the people, we abused your trust in the realm of healthcare, but trust us on climate, right? We abused your trust in the realm of migration. We abused or we didn't satisfy or work satisfactorily in the realm of politics, but trust us in the area of crime. This is not how this works. People either trust their government or they don't. And this was, in the end, I believe, the recipe of Sweden and the Nordic countries. If people genuinely say, we know that government is not going to get everything right, but they will at least try to be transparent and have our best interest at heart, people can forgive mistakes and they stay on board. And this, I have to admit, the Swedish way could have gone awfully wrong. But the Swedish government, kind of with what was the name, Anders Tegnell, the lead virologist, they went out and said, this is our strategy. We believe this is the best way forward. We cannot make a promise, because we can only tell you that we do not know if it's going to work, but it's our best shot. That was completely different from as it was in Austria, in the United States, in Germany, in France, where politicians said, we know what to do. We have the solution. We know precisely. That's completely. So this
they had the solution. All the pandemic plans that they ignored. No.
Exactly. And this goes back to, I think, with the Thornin argument, where he's right. It's always we have this magic button we could push to solve all the problems. But in order to push the button, we just need a little bit more power. Right? And it's never enough, right? It's never done enough. They just need a little bit more and a little bit more. And then before you know it, right? It's again, no country in Europe is on the brink of a dictatorship, but the tendency is towards a more authoritarian kind of politics and a more authoritarian kind of public discourse. I think that is undeniable. And it's important to kind of counter this when it's still small than before it becomes uncontrollable. So the argument that many say, well, it's not as bad as China, for example, that's a very weak argument. And it's like imagine you break your leg and I say, what are you whining about? At least it's not a heart attack, and that's not going to help you, right? So this is so I think there's a lot we still have to work through with this. I cannot speak to how especially the younger generation has been affected by this. I mean, in Austria,
I don't think we're going to know for 20 years how bad.
I think so too. But I mean, we pretty much we stole. For some people in certain ages, I mean, we stole the two of the most important years in their development in their young lives from them. And in hindsight, a lot of the things that happen are unforgivable. And it would have been nice for governments, for politicians to come forward and say, we made huge mistakes, something we probably can never make up, but at least we admit the mistakes. But they still, like, again, if you ask them, no, they did everything. It's like if you ask Angela Merkel about Russia, right? She knew it all. Like, she recently gave an interview where she said, for her, it was always clear that Putin is a bad guy. And this is the maddening thing about politicians. No matter how much they fail, they always tell you, oh, I knew all of this way beforehand. It was always clear to me. And it's frustrating.
It just feels like if you had that information, maybe you wouldn't shut down your nuclear power plants completely.
Yeah, right, exactly. and the thing is, people would be up either they surround themselves with the wrong people. If you come forward and say a mistake was made, I have changed my belief. For example, right? If Robert Habeck comes forward and say the Green German Minister of the Economy and the Environment, if he comes forward and says my position on nuclear power was wrong, I think we need to correct course. I bet everything I have that many Germans would say it takes guts to do that. Right, kind of to go out in public to say we made a mistake, but my primary is to provide energy security for the German people, and that's more important than my own ideological goals. I think even people who don't sympathize with the Greens would say, you know what, this is leadership. This is what I expect from a person in power, but they can't do it. Right, the politics at the moment. They can never admit a mistake. I find it fascinating to observe. Right? They just can't. Whatever it is, it's never their fault, right? You have Christine Lagarde, right, the head of the ECB, saying 2 weeks ago in an interview, well, inflation came out of the blue. Nobody saw it coming.
I want to punch them in the face when they say stuff like that. It's like, fuck you. Like me with no economics degree remembers my 15-year-old history lesson. Weimar Republic. Don't print loads of money without like anything to spend it on. Just don't do it. It's going to end badly. And these pricks that are getting paid millions can stand there with a straight face, fucking say it.
It's exactly. It's amazing. Right? They can't. And the energy transition will be the same thing. In 10 years, when we finally, and the course correction is gonna come. It's gonna come one way or another. Right? They're gonna stand there and say, oh, "We always knew this." And it was always clear to us that it's gonna. And again, we're still gonna be there and have to deal with it. And then this is the funny part. And then they will wonder again when every poll that comes out. And every survey they do says that the least trusted people are, it's usually politicians and the media. And they're going to say, well, what can we do to increase their trust? Or why don't they trust us anymore? It's not a mystery. It really is not such a mystery.
Well, that feels like a lovely place on which to end things. Ralph, it's been, an absolute blast having you on the show. Thanks so much for taking the time.
Well, thank you for having me. This was so much fun.
Yeah, no problem, man. Is there anything you would like to point people towards of your work for them to check out?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. If anybody should be, I'd be humbled if anybody should be interested. If you just Google either, my name, Ralph Schoellhammer, it takes you directly. Kind of the first hit is my homepage, and now Google even recognizes me as an author, so something else to cross off my bucket list. And I mean, generally, as I write, I mean, I'm so honored and so happy that I had the opportunity to be on your podcast. Like everything, right? I mean, I'm sure that we are also wrong on many issues. So this is always my recommendation to to remain humble and also be aware of kind of maybe as a general last point. This maybe if you allow me one broader point, I think this is also a little bit the problem. We have undermined so many traditional sources of meaning in life, right? That then these broad that politics generally has become a replacement for this, and I think this is a very, very dangerous development, because once politics becomes the center of your life, or political positions, whether it's on climate, whether it's on abortion, whether it's on, and I don't even care which of the possibilities is, right? Whether it's the right wing or the left wing position. But if this becomes such an entrenched part of your identity, right, it's going to be very hard to come to solutions, because it's no longer a debate about a technical problem to be solved. It becomes a discussion about who you are, and that makes it so much more difficult. And again, there's my recommendation always, to kind of find yourself in your friendships with people around you, in family, in actual people around you, and not who posted something about you on Twitter, or left a mean Facebook comment. These things are, I mean, I think I'm in the lucky position. Most of my friends and almost all of my family are inactive on social media. My parents to this day don't even know what Twitter is. So this is always, I think, for me, a very comforting thing, where I say, why should I care if John Smith XY2 says, Schoellhammer, you're an idiot? And then I sit at home and say, oh my God, there is some guy whose name I don't know and whose picture is a little egg, and he thinks I'm an idiot. What can I do to convince him of my great? No, right? So and the same with politics. As I said, if tomorrow, for example, we have a breakthrough in battery storage, and we can load these batteries with wind and solar, and it gets us through the winter, I'm the first one, to break ground for a solar panel and a wind turbine in my parents' garden. So because my soul is not tied to nuclear, my soul is not tied to fossil fuels, but I just think that I don't want people to be poor, right? I don't want people to suffer. It's we tend to underestimate that if life becomes more expensive, it's not just about the banana and the pineapple I mentioned. It's also about MRIs. It's also about dialysis. It's also about cancer treatments, and I want as many people as possible to have access to this, and it's not possible without cheap and reliable energy. And unless we find a replacement, I think we have to fight to keep it reliable, to enable as many people a dignified and prosperous life as possible.
Well, that is a beautiful message to finish on, Ralph. Yeah, thanks very much, man. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you, Josh. Thank you so much.
Hey, everyone. Thanks for making it right the way to the end of the podcast. I love that you tuned in this long. Do me a favor, hit subscribe, because 80% of you bastards are not subscribing, but you're watching my videos. See you next time.